This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane, Pittman and Olgun with you between round 16 and round 17. At some point, it's going to swap over there. We don't really know where we're at right now. We are recording this on Tuesday morning. There is a game tonight. So we reserve the right, if things change tonight, which we know they probably will in the NBL, to backtrack our takes, Olgun. But we're going to move forward. We've got plenty to talk about. Injury update you're going to bring in just a second. We are going to look at the run home for who I believe are the four teams that are playing for that fifth and sixth spot on the NBL standings. We're going to look at the Kings lineup that continues to change. We're going to talk about Adelaide and the most Adelaide 36er weekend of all time, a loss to Tassie, a win over Illawarra, and there's more to break down as well. So we're going to get into that right across the show. I normally ask how you're doing. I trust that you're doing well, Olgun, so let me just get straight to the news. You have just reported the injury, the hamstring injury to Derrick Walton Jr., who has been on fire of late. What is going on with this hamstring? Not for the first time. It looked pretty nasty.
Yeah, and we sort of knew this. As soon as he had that injury, he hopped off the floor. I was told he ran into like the practice court that's like adjacent to that court in Gippsland. So he's got a high-grade left hamstring injury. It'll keep him out for the remainder of the regular season. There is some hope from the Phoenix and from that front office and coaching staff that he could be ready if the Phoenix get to like a championship series. Maybe he might be able to make himself available, but from what I understand, that's if he ticks every single box and his rehab goes absolutely perfectly. Like that is the scenario that has to happen for Derrick Walton Jr. to be back at any point this season. But at the very least, we know he'll be out for the remainder of the regular season, and we'll probably only see him, and there's only a small chance that happens, if the Phoenix go really far in a postseason.
Yeah, this is a massive shame. They did pick up that win over Brisbane, but we discussed the Phoenix and how the upside was on the offense. The upside was with Derrick Walton Jr., who since the Phoenix had that 10-day gap up until New Year's Eve, December 31st, from that point, he'd been on fire and he looked like a completely different guy. He was getting to the free throw line. He was in attack mode. So, maybe he was starting to feel more confident in his body. But the interesting part of this, and I tried to follow this with real interest. The game was in Traralgon. We know the Phoenix do a great job. They get out to the country. I was at a game in Wangaratta in the preseason, which was really fun. The fans love it. It's always a fun environment. But there was a lot of talk about this floor and perhaps the weather conditions and a slippery floor. Now, look, Walton's got a history of hamstring injuries. It looked like he was at full stretch. He was powering towards the basket. Did it have anything to do with the slippery floor? I'm not 100% sure. But this was certainly an interesting postgame because the Bullets, they didn't seem happy with the fact that maybe not so much that the game went ahead, but it didn't seem like they felt there was the requisite care for their concerns.
Yeah, I spoke with some people within the Bullets after the game. They continued to be extremely angry about the circumstances. I'm told that Josh Bannon also got injured as a direct result of the slippery floor. So he got a scan on Monday. We'll find out at some point today. We're recording this on Tuesday. What his injury is. I think there was a fear that it could be a medial injury. So you're looking at a potential MCL situation. That is something that he dealt with at the start of last season. So ideally, that's not what the case is, but he got an MRI yesterday. So we'll hear about that at some point soon. Same thing with Deng Adel. He's been dealing with a groin injury. I think he re-injured that. Whether that's a result of the floor, I don't know. When I spoke to some people around the game, someone told me that the windows were sweating. That was one line that I got given. It was a mixture of, I think there were thunderstorms, at the time or prior to the game, and then it was extremely humid. It's just the nature of one of those regional arenas that if you don't put that aircon on early enough, then it's probably not adequate to play a professional basketball game in. Now the Boomers play some games there in the middle of February for some FIBA Asia Cup qualifiers, so that's something that I think they'll take a serious look at. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement, and we've seen examples of this not just over the course of this season, but over the course of the last few seasons. Of yes, playing in regional arenas is awesome, but having the requisite safety protocols and just general logistical protocols is probably the things that you have to tick off before you choose to go play over there. I appreciate the idea of stretching out across the state that you exist in or across the country you exist in, but if those things aren't ticked off, I don't know how you can play real games in those sorts of arenas.
Yeah, you also wonder whether, if that's the case, I know there was the talk from Justin Schuller about the air conditioner. You pointed to that. Was it on early enough? Was it too humid in there? Was it just too sweaty in that building? Could they have delayed the game 2 hours? Now, I know that there are all sorts of challenges when that happens, when it comes to broadcast and ticketing and all those stuff. Like, I understand it's not an ideal situation, but also if there is real concerns from the teams, you can't afford to put yourself in a situation where after the game, they are suggesting that some of their key players have been hurt because of the issues that they raised before the game. So I'm curious to see how the NBL handles that. I haven't seen anything come from them just at this point. But then you did have another game with New Zealand and Melbourne.
I have a quote from the NBL if you want me to read that.
Yes, please do.
This was right after the game. I believe we got sent this. And if you'll forgive me if I'll try to find this.
Always.
It got sent in it's quite long, so allow me. So this was provided the day after the game. So regarding Brisbane's complaint about the court and safety, the operations team is looking into it as nothing has been noted as an issue on the game report from last night. So there is usually an official in the arena who provides a game report following every game. This is common practice. Every time a player slips over on the court, it is logged and assessed to make sure nothing untoward occurred regarding the surface/decals, etc. While we wait an official response, and as of now we still don't have that response. In the event it doesn't come through before the game and it comes up as a talking point, the fact last night's game went ahead means the ops team deemed the court safe based on its minimum standards and related policies. So it was the ops team. When we've been at games, you see there's one or two people, they'll go around, they'll test the decals, they'll test the sideline. So these people, from what we're told, they did the requisite sort of check on the court and they deemed it safe to play on. So that is important to note as well. But I've heard from enough players, and Justin Schuller said it publicly. Casey Prater said he was just trying to be careful out there. We've heard it from enough people that probably didn't feel safe to play on.
Yeah, and it is a shame, particularly if the players feel that way. And I would tend to lean on their side of those things when they're out there actually playing the game. And you don't want, I mean, that's a big time swing game. We're going to get to the run home here in just a second, and Brisbane and South East Melbourne, they're battling for that. So now they could significantly shift the postseason run here. So it's not what you like to see. We also saw the game between New Zealand and Melbourne in New Plymouth. Basically no clock for the second half of this game, which you ended up having a game winner from Chris Golding. And I know they panned to the scoreboard on the wall there, so at least we had some idea of 4.7. I don't believe the commentators were in the building as well, so it seemed like they were kind of in the dark for a lot of this game. So again, we love it, and that's a really cool venue, the old hangar-style basketball arena. It looks awesome. Visually, it's fantastic. We're going to get this right, man. And that was made the viewing experience a challenge there for that game, and they don't play there too often either.
We literally saw a young lady having to unplug the shot clock and try to plug it back in again.
The old turn off, turn on again. It's worth a shot, man. It is worth a shot. You know.
They tried it. It didn't work. And obviously, like, awesome game, really fun chess match between Dean Vickman and Pedri Coppiner with Taco in and out. Chris Golding going supernova and then hitting that insane game winner that was, I thought, defended really well. But he's just an unbelievable shot maker. And again, for the NBL, can you stop putting the New Zealand Breakers in New Plymouth and then having them play a game 2 days later? This happened last season. I remember New Zealand had to play in New Plymouth. They lost to Melbourne United. Remember the Zylan Cheatham timeout fiasco? And then they had to travel the entire next day to Sydney, and then they got blown out by an average Sydney team by 30 points. And now they play Melbourne United. They lose in a similar fashion, in a heartbreaking way, and then I think they go home. So they travel to Auckland to then play a game, what I believe is on Thursday.
So Thursday's enough time this one.
Yeah, give them a break after they go to New Plymouth, especially after the shot clock fiasco. I feel like you just give them some time off. And also, New Zealand played not long ago. I feel like I was in Wollongong on Sunday. So it's just that team goes through a lot of travel at the best of times, but at the worst of times, it really, really hurts them.
It does, and they are cramming in all these games right now. And for New Zealand now, I would say pretty comfortably that's them done for the season. They're a fair way off. They've only got 6 games left to go in the season. But I did think it was a good time to look at the run home because we always hear about everyone's still mathematically a chance. This could potentially happen. Every team's still in it. But I think it's fair enough to suggest right now, particularly when you look where Perth are at 13-9, Sydney are 14-10. they're going to win at least one or two games. I think they're going to be fine. So to me, I'm looking at South East Melbourne, Tasmania, Brisbane and Adelaide, 4 teams looking for the final 2 spots. And again, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, so the Phoenix play Tuesday night in Cairns. That's a game you would like to take advantage of and just get the W there. And then Brisbane play Wednesday night against Perth. So a couple of big games, but this is going to pivot and change. So just keep an eye on this right now. The way I look at it, Olgun, and tell me how you feel, the Phoenix 12-10, Tasmania 12-11. So they've only got 6 games left. Brisbane 10-12, Adelaide 10-12. So first things first, Adelaide, that loss against Tasmania, just a horrific loss against a team that is completely decimated by injury. You're up late. You just can't afford to lose that game because that's a real swing game. I think 15 wins is the target here for both the Phoenix and Tasmania. The one thing I would say with the Phoenix, they've got a significantly better percentage than those 3 teams chasing them. But if Tasmania can go 3-3 in their last 6 games, I like their chances because that would mean that Brisbane, who I think is a slightly lesser chance than Adelaide, these teams would have to go 5-2 to even be on par, and then it comes down to a battle of percentage. So I think 15 wins is the target, and for Tasmania, in those last 6 games, they've got a game at New Zealand, they've got a game versus Cairns to finish the season. So I know Tassie fans, you love your team and you want to be confident, but let's be real, this team is just hanging on right now. They are hanging on because they don't have the bodies out on the floor. Can they go 3-3 and make the final 6? But I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, look at what Adelaide just did this week, which is a very tight loss to Tasmania and then a tight win over Illawarra. They were up, 15 plus in both of those games. They were up 25 plus points against Illawarra. That was an awesome opportunity for them to gain some percentage back. They could have got their percentage with 2 wins if they continued to play at the level. Their percentage could have been hovering around 100 right now. Right? They're still back down to 96-ish. That's not a great place to be, especially if you're fighting for those spots, especially if you're fighting against Tasmania for one of those spots, right? So that's like that double loss, plus you don't get the percentage that you could have had if you just kept playing the same way that you did in the first half. That's the first thing. I thought they blew an awesome opportunity to gain that. I look at Adelaide, I'm still not completely convinced. I don't think they guarded well in either of those games against Illawarra. I thought Illawarra missed like 12, 13, 14 wide open threes. I thought Adelaide got away with it. And then the other thing, and I said this last week, is injuries. And you look at the South East Melbourne Phoenix fighting for this spot. Now, I still think their floor is still considerably high, just because there is some depth there, and I think they do have the pieces to make up for the loss of Derrick Walton Jr., but I think it does hurt their peak. So I think for them, I'm not too concerned. I think they have a defensive foundation, and they figured a lot out under Josh King. When it comes to Brisbane and Tasmania, they're the 2 teams that I can see dropping some of those, quote-unquote winnable games just because they're going to be missing guys. We don't know what Josh Bannon's injury is yet, but, Keandre Cook has been in and out. Josh Adams doesn't look 100%. Tyrell Harris is probably going to miss the next game with that delayed concussion. And then you look at Tasmania, obviously no Sean McDonald, no Will Magnay. So this is an opportunity for the Adelaide 36ers, who are on the opposite end of that spectrum. They got Jarrell Martin, who's getting into some sort of shape. He's looking better and better with each game. They got Sunday Detch back. So they're getting healthier. Other teams are falling apart. And I think that's just the thing. It sucks because there's much analysis we can do about how teams operate, how they play style, and how good they are on either end. Ultimately, it's a injured versus non-injured thing. And it's just likely what it's going to come down to. But when it comes to this very specific granular race of who's going to make that 5 and 6, Adelaide has a really good shot purely because they're not injured right now. But going 5 and 2 over this next stretch is a very, very tall order.
They got so much firepower, man. And we can get into the Adelaide 36ers now. Look, the crossover games between these 4 teams are the ones that you got to watch. So if I'm looking at this Adelaide 36ers team, they've already been must-watch all season. But they're going to be must-watch down the stretch because they play into big-time games. They're at Perth coming up next. They finished their season at Perth. So they've got 2 trips to Perth. They also have a trip to Melbourne to play South East Melbourne. They've got a trip to Sydney. They've got a trip to Cairns. So they're on the road for a lot of this stretch home. And the crossover games they host Brisbane, and then, as I said, they go to South East Melbourne Phoenix. So it's in the Adelaide 36ers' hands. But again, I look at it, and if they had to just taken care of business in the last minute against Tasmania, they're 11-11 right now. And even though they would be on the outside looking in, because of the personnel issues with some of the teams above them, I would almost lock them in. I would say this Adelaide team is going to find a way to get there. They'll win at least half their games on the way home. But now you see it, and I think if someone didn't watch the NBL, Olgun, and they said, well, geez, this Adelaide 36 roster is pretty good. Explain to me how they play basketball. How would you describe this 36ers team? I would direct them to watch the last two games against Tasmania and against Illawarra, because in stretches in those games, they looked awesome. In stretches of those games, they continued to crucify themselves. This is a team that plays against the opposition, and they play against themselves. They've been doing it all season long, and the second you think that they look awesome, they will show you why they are below 500 and battling in the last 6 games of the season to make the play. And it's ridiculous. They shouldn't be in this position, but they continue to hurt themselves.
So this Adelaide team, I think, is emotional. And emotional in good ways and bad ways. Exactly, right? So it's in good ways in that when they're rolling, right? And they can play good basketball in stretches. And I think that's when the ball does move around. Honestly, I think when the ball's in Montrezl Harrell's hands, and it's not just him barreling to the rim, his passing over the past few games has been really, really impressive. The high-low stuff with Isaac Humphries, with Jarrell Martin has been really good. And then I think this team just gets in stretches where they get selfish, where guys just want to get their own. And things become very healer-centric, largely around Kendrick Davis, who I think we can all agree is a special offensive player. He is so, so good. But I think when the offense is just centered only around him, and it's either him dribbling the ball for 20 seconds and then jacking a tough shot, which he'll often make, or it's him dribbling for 20 seconds and then throwing a hot potato to someone else. I don't think that's not how this team wins. And I feel like they play decent basketball to start games, and then they revert back to those sort of selfish ways. And I think if they stop doing that, then they'll have a chance to win most of these games. But then I think defensively, I don't know if they have the cattle. I think if Sunday Dech isn't at 100%, I'm not sure where the resistance is, because it's definitely not up front, and it's definitely not in the backcourt, stopping at the point of attack. And then I think Montrezl Harrell, Sam Folling ate Montrezl Harrell up. Mike Wells spoke in the press conference about the tough decision he's got to make as far as which of the bigs he plays. I think Mike Wells is a Jarrell Martin guy, and so Isaac Humphries has been demoted to the bench in stretches. But then what that does to your defense is it becomes extremely terrible, and you have no chance of stopping either penetration or any sort of big around the basket, because I don't think Montrezl Harrell is built to do that, and Jarrell Martin's definitely not built to do that. So they're in a pickle when it comes to the lineups that they need out there to be effective defensively. But I think offensively, the better lineups probably includes someone like a Jarrell Martin. But I think it comes down to these guys just getting too emotional at times. And it's making sure that they can continue to ride the positive emotional waves and not getting in those negative ones. Because it seems like as soon as they fall into any sort of hole, even if it's a tiny hole, it's very tough for them to crawl out of.
Yeah, it's almost like they, particularly offensively, and it's happened in third quarters. It happened in the third quarter against Tassie. It happened in the third quarter against Illawarra as well. They come out at halftime, and it's now they all want to get their own. And this is where the Isaac Humphries thing is fascinating to me. And firstly, can I just say, I was a little surprised, and this is where Adelaide again got away with one, I think. Isaac Humphries swinging the elbows through at head height, back and forward, collects Mason Peatling. I was a little surprised in the broadcast that they were talking about it being a basketball action and a basketball move. That's a foul in every game. You are not allowed to, even if you're driving to the basket, you're not allowed to catch a guy in the elbow, let alone be stationary and swinging your elbows left and right. So they got very lucky that he did not get his second foul, because that would have been a second foul. And I'm not talking about a tech or anything like that, but I'm just talking about a second personal foul that would have taken him to the bench, because he was so critical to this team. Because I think part of the problem offensively is I get a little annoyed when it's every single big man in the league. The commentators post him up. It's like, all right, it's not the 80s and 90s, okay, man. We don't need to have guys in the block every single game. People don't want to see that. But I think when you get the ball to Isaac Humphries, or you at least involve him in actions, then you force this team to play offense. You force them to actually run sets, because Isaac Humphries can't get his own shot. He's not that guy. So if you want to get him involved, then all of a sudden you get guys rolling to the basket, you get guys running to the corner, and he will make the pass. So then all of a sudden you get spray out threes. When it's just Harrell, or who has racked up some assists, and I know Kendrick Davis is averaging 7 or 8, whatever. But we all watch enough. When Harrell has it, he's a bucket getter. DJ Vasiljevic is a bucket getter. Kendrick Davis is a bucket getter. Humphries is the one guy in this team that to get him involved, and it'll look great when he's involved. That's why every single time you see Isaac Humphries cooking, everyone's like, wow, the offense looks great, because they're forced to run offense when he's on the floor. So then later on in this game, the third quarter, he's not getting a touch because they're just playing isolation basketball. So what does Isaac Humphries do? He gets the ball, and it's like a slow motion crash from the 3-point line. He just starts rumbling down the floor because he's like, I got to get a shot here. He runs through Lockie Ulbrich in the most obvious charge of all time. Ulbrich could have sat there and boiled a kettle and had a cup of tea, and he still would have had time to finish it before Humphries ran into him. But I'm sitting there and I'm going, no wonder he's pissed off because he hasn't had the ball in the first 6 minutes of the half. So I think that's how they find themselves in trouble there. And that's why he's a key. And it's not just throwing it on the block and getting Humphries the ball. It's running offense.
And it's not just Humphries either. And I agree, Humphries is a significant part of it. DJ had one shot in the second half.
He's lost in this offense, and it doesn't make sense. He's too good.
It's because he's not part of it. He's just DJ is a bystander, and I think DJ is too good for that. And I said this last week that there's a broader conversation to be had about it, but these are DJ and Isaac are your two guys who are signed on multi-year deals there. Like you're creating
and they have great chemistry. Those two play a great two-man game. Like fantastic.
100%. And they could also be stars in their own right. They could also be complementary to good imports. But you're creating an environment where you're sort of pushing these guys. Like if DJ had any inkling that he wants to go play in Europe, you're creating an environment where it's saying, okay, yeah, you go play in Europe, and then you've lost an elite local. Right? You don't want to put your franchise in that situation. That is, again, a conversation for another day. It's a broader conversation to be had because it happens around the league too. But I agree. Again, everything gets very heliocentric. It gets a little bit selfish. And against Tasmania, how many times did we see, obviously Kendrick Davis got out in the break and got a bunch of layups just with steals or bad shots, and he's just super quick and he gets on the rim. How many times, though, did we see transition opportunities for the 36ers where they didn't pass it off it was a 2-on-1. They didn't pass it off. It was a 3-on-2. No one passed the ball because guys don't know when they're going to get the ball because, again, the offense is centered around one guy and you may see it, you may not. And so I think in order to sustain the offense, you do need to be able to move the ball and get everyone else involved. I feel like that's the only way to sustain that because I don't see a world where their defense is sustainable going forward. And you talk about that stretch home, and I think of 2 games in Perth, 1 in Sydney, and 1 in Melbourne, you said, against South East Melbourne. On paper, obviously, they could win all of those games, right? And it wouldn't be surprising because it's the NBL. But if you were a betting man, you would probably bet that they lose all those games. So that's 4 losses already, and that kicks them out of the playoff hunt. So this is a really tough stretch home, even for a team that is showing glimpses of playing reasonable basketball.
Yeah, that's why this Perth game this big. And I don't think, and I'm not even saying anything you're saying now is overly critical of Kendrick Davis. I know everyone gets into Olgun because of the start of the season.
I said it the whole time. He's a special offensive player, like obviously. So, and we said that from day one too. But they're not in the 6. This just is what it is right now. Let's see if they can get there.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because people will be like, oh man, like look at him, he's averaging, like trust me, he's on the short list of players that I want to watch in this league. Like he's out of control, some of the shot making he can make. But the combination of players right now, and we have to look at coaching, like why are they coming out and playing this way every third quarter? There is questions about how this team has come together. I think that's very obvious from what we've seen right throughout the season. So it's not even targeting the individuals. It's just like this group of players. I still think that they'll make the 6. I like that run home. It starts this Friday against Bryce Cotton. And by the way, Bryce has had a 49-point game. And then the next time he had a 21-point and 12-assist game. He's on fire right now. So they've got to do something to at least try and, slow him down in any way they can. But yeah, I love the individual talent. But yeah, even you made the point about Montrezl Harrell. And that's why Isaac Humphries is important for this team, just to hold them together defensively. Harrell, you just look at the numbers, and he had 26 points and 9 rebounds in that game against Illawarra, 3 assists. Offensively, he's a beast. He's one of the most unstoppable forces in this league. But Sam Froling, as you pointed to, he was absolutely licking his lips when Isaac Humphries was off the floor in foul trouble because he's like, this guy cannot do anything to slow me down. And even in the game against Tassie a few nights ago, Vab Krislovic and Ian Hummer, who has looked allergic to scoring since he came in the league, felt no issue at all with attacking him off the dribble and making big plays off Pupaji. So, yeah, Imajuk Dang. So, yeah, there's problems defensively there with him, even though, again, unstoppable force on the offensive end. So, yeah, I think the Sixers probably get there. That might have more to do with the teams above them. And because of that offensive talent, they're going to be scary for any team that they play in the play-in. I still would imagine that the teams that are finished in third and fourth, although please, Adelaide, Bryce, take care of them this week. Let's just keep Adelaide out of the six. They're the one team that I think everyone doesn't want there. And yet we've got a 3-month sample size to tell you that they'll give you wins.
And let's say they make the 6, and let's say the 5th team is South East Melbourne. All of a sudden, you have, we're assuming it's going to be a healthy Adelaide against South East Melbourne Phoenix.
They can do damage still. For all we talk about it, like this 36ers team can still do damage because we've seen in games like that Melbourne United game 2 weeks ago, like they can have days where they're like, all right, we're going to all be on the same page here. We're just going to run offense and we're going to score and no one can really stop us because we're so damn talented from top to bottom. And your point about Jarrell Martin, not only just hitting the jump shot a little bit, there was one play where he put the ball on the floor and he just attacked poor old Lockie Olberg. It looks like he got a knee to the guts and there was nothing you could do. He's looking like Jarrell Martin a little bit. We haven't seen it all season long. So maybe the best of the 36ers is still to come. Certainly the fans would be hoping so. There, I would suggest the challenge rule. Did I see on the broadcast or hear on the broadcast that there was going to be some change? Because I blew up about the challenges last week. I was just fed up. I'd seen enough. And when I was watching that Adelaide Tasmania game, I saw 2 of the most mind-boggling examples of this joke of a rule that we've got going on right now that just made me shut the laptop. I needed to go for a walk outside and cool off for a second because I was so annoyed. The first one was Montrezl Harrell, a clear foul on the rebound, a shove in the back. Now, he claimed that he didn't touch him, but he also claimed earlier in the game that he didn't foul Ian Hummer, and poor old Ian Hummer nearly left the building with only one arm attached to his body. So Montrezl Harrell, questionable when he's asking for the reviews. Anyway, the Adelaide 36ers reviewed it. The officials decided, that is a foul, and they went jump ball.
I don't know, man. If that's
how does that work?
That is a foul on a rebound contest.
Yes.
Montrezl Harrell committed the foul. Adelaide challenged it. They were unsuccessful. So the foul stands. So the foul should stand.
So we're going to jump ball. Please make that make sense.
Should be Tasmania ball. The fact that it was a jump ball makes no sense. I don't even know what weird like nitty gritty rule of he had possession. I don't care who had possession. He committed a foul on a loose ball on a rebound contest.
And it was a foul that was called.
Be Tasmania.
I don't know.
It was again. If the challenge wasn't called, it would just be Tasmania ball. The challenge was called. It was unsuccessful. It should just remain as is. The fact that it wasn't made no sense. And the NBL, I don't understand what the comms they put out was. It says, and I'm reading it. The NBL will make an immediate adjustment. This was prior to the Sydney Cairns game, or prior to that day of basketball. The NBL will make an immediate adjustment to its rules, which will ensure all unsuccessful coaches' challenges result in the play resuming from the point of interruption as though the challenge was never called.
Okay. So
why was that not the case already?
I don't know, man. I find it bizarre. Right? I said this last week. I don't even blame the NBA refs that are on the floor because how are they supposed to understand this ridiculous, confusing, makes no sense rule book that they're supposed to follow? And if they were confused by that and somehow that was a mistake, I don't know, but I can hardly blame them. Why don't we just have common sense? It's pretty simple because there was another example later in the game. Kendrick Davis is trapped in the corner. He does what every player does. This was a crafty play by Kendrick Davis. Don't get me wrong. When you're trapped in the corner and there's nothing you can do, eventually you try and act like you were pushed out of bounds and you fall out of bounds because you got no other option. He did that. He wasn't fouled. He fell out of bounds. So it should be Tasmania ball. Tasmania challenged to say, well, we didn't foul him. And they said, you're right. You didn't foul him. Adelaide ball. What? What? I don't understand. Like if the refs are allowed to just use common sense, then they just say, okay, there was no foul there. He's out of bounds. Tasmania your ball. Like, I don't know. Like, it's not that hard to me.
Okay, here's what the NBL should have done. That Kendrick Davis foul in the corner that resulted in it being Adelaide ball for some reason, right? Because should have been a no call. Kendrick Davis fell out of bounds. That's the thing that the NBL should have amended immediately, where you should act as though the foul was never called, right? And I think we all agree with that because we saw an example of this in the Sydney Cairns game where Xavier Cooks was called for a blocking foul. Sydney got the ball because the ball fell out of Taron Armstrong's hands. They had an opportunity to run, but it was a foul call on Xavier Cooks. But because when the foul was called, the ball was in Taron Armstrong's hands, it's Cairns' ball. That obviously should have been the call that they changed, the rule that they changed, that we should act as though that the call never happened. The fact that they went and doubled down on the mistake they made with the Montrezl Harrell call, because it obviously shouldn't have been a jump ball. It should obviously have been Tasmania ball because, again, if a shot goes up and it's you and I wrestling for a rebound, if I foul you, it's then your ball. If you foul me, it's then my ball. That's how a rebound contests work. So I don't know why they didn't just come out and say, oh, yeah, our bad. We were wrong about it. The fact that they doubled down, changed the rule in a way that doesn't really change the rule. This is back to what basketball is. Around world basketball, whoever gets fouled in the rebound contest gets the ball. So I don't know what the challenge is for. I think the spirit of the rule is broken at this point. I don't know about just scrapping it until you get it right, but there are enough people around this league who are saying we don't like if this isn't an outcome based system, then what is it for, basically?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm sure there's people out there that would argue there's multiple things that the league can work on in the offseason. But to me, this is clearly number one in terms of right now when you are coming towards the back end of a season where every single possession matters for some of these games. And that Adelaide-Tasmania is one of those games where every possession mattered. It went to overtime. It was a 1-point game. And you've got two teams that are battling for postseason to make the play-in. Like, this isn't Division 6 at the Life Bennett Centre in Geelong, where I used to do my finest work. This is real professional basketball, and the rule is as amateur as it comes. So I don't think it's that hard. I think that they're trying to confuse everyone with the way it's set up right now with the where was the ball when the foul occurred. No. If the foul occurred in the play, don't worry about anything else. Like, that matters in a shooting instance where, okay, did the foul occur at the same time as the shot? Does the basket count? I get that. But when it's just loose ball like this, I don't understand why it's so complicated, because it is very, very basic. And those were two errors in that Tasmania game. And the Sydney Cairns one, that was a close game as well. That was a little earlier in the game, but Brian Goorjian was losing his mind over it. But this is too serious to have blatant. And they can say the rule is right, whatever. The rule is messed up. Like, they were wrong calls, and they shouldn't be allowed to make those calls no matter what the rule says. And it really matters in those games. So if you're the fans of these teams, I got no emotional investment in the team, and I'm fired up. If I'm a fan of Tasmania in that game, I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, because as a team, you work extremely hard to gain an advantage in so many different ways. And then a ref comes in, calls something based on a feeling sometimes. Maybe they see something incorrectly, and then all of a sudden your advantage is taken away from you, and you don't get any reward for it. And then the idea of changing a rule, so changing the challenge rule, when some teams have 7 games left, some have 8 games left, some have 6 games left. So this will necessarily be an advantage to certain teams because of where they are and how many games they played. So it's a bit all over the place. I don't like the idea of the league just not fronting up and saying, yeah, this was wrong. They've done it in other cases. I thought this was a really clear case of it. And then they went and changed the rule that no one cares about and kept in place the rule that I think is an actual issue. So I don't know. Again, the whole spirit of the thing is we want the right calls to be made. And the fact that it doesn't seem like that's what they're endeavoring to get.
Yeah, and the final point I would just make is sometimes if there's an error, maybe you just, let's just pretend it didn't happen. I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but this is getting worse every single weekend. And you don't want it happening in a playing game. You don't want it happening in a playoff game. And the fans are frustrated. I scrolled through Twitter. As you know, obviously over here in the US, I watch the games on delay. And I went back on Twitter to see, who was really, and it was just endless, the tweets about these calls. No one understood. Everyone said it didn't make sense, and no one was happy about it. And this is happening week on week on week. So, yeah, they're going to, I don't know what they do right now in the middle of the season. It's very challenging, but I don't know how we got here in the first place. It makes no sense to me. I mentioned Brian Goorjian wasn't happy with that challenge call. He also hasn't been happy with his lineups all season long, and the starters haven't been getting it done. This is a terrible first half team. And it's not just the first quarters. Their back end of the second quarters, if you look at the minute-by-minute data, season long, you can get that on Spatial Jam. End of the second quarters, they're absolutely awful as well. And so it did prompt me today to just go through the different starting lineups that they've tried. Of course, some of this is through injury. Obviously, Jalen Galloway's out for the year.
How much time do we have? You can go through all of their starting lineups?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few of them. So here's the thing, that their most used starting lineup in 24 games, played 5 games together. That was the first 5 games of the season. There was Bull Quell, Jalen Adams, Xavier Cooks, Alex Tui, and Kelly Lepepe as well. So they played the first 5 games, and from then they've changed. From then they've basically changed every 2 games. So they've used 10 different starting lineups in 24 games. And I don't know at this point of the season, because every time you think this team is getting settled, and Cam Oliver started those few games, and now he's not starting again. And then Bull Quell obviously comes in. So again, some of it's been health related, but this team can't get settled. Brian Goorjian seems frustrated by the starters, but he also seems frustrated seriously by some of the defensive stuff of particularly the high profile players on this team. He publicly is talking us all through it. He's telling us that he has to manage a series of things, which he does. You've got your imports, you've got your star players. There's lots of egos involved here. You're trying to look after your best players and get them through. It's just a continuous roller coaster, and yet this team somehow still pretty comfortably in the top 4. They're just doing it on talent, I guess. I'm not sure what to make of Sydney. It's crazy, man. What a wild year for this team.
It's been so weird, and what I think it is Gorge has come in with expectations on certain guys. And I think the 2 easy ones to point to are Isaiah Liafa and Cam Oliver. And I think he thought, all right, we've got these 2 guys, and they're gonna come in and they're gonna do X, and Cam Oliver is gonna do Y. And then there are stretches where those guys don't do those things that Gorge was expecting of them. And so it's like, all right, we need to put Sean Bruce in the starting lineup because we need another ball handler out there, which it's questionable whether that's even the case. You have Xavier Cooks out there who can, get a team into an offense. So that's one thing. All right, we need Sean Bruce in there. And then Cam Oliver isn't doing the exact thing we expect from him. So, all right, we need Kelly Lepepe in there. And then if that's not working, then, all right, we're going to play Xavier at the 5 and then Tui at the 4 and then Bull Quell back in the lineup at the 3. So I think it's because of it's Isaiah Liafa and it's Cam Oliver just being inconsistent in the role that I think Gorge wants from them. Now, I'm curious at the persistence of the Isaiah Liafa minutes. Because I just don't think they've worked for the most part this season. Cam Oliver, I understand the idea of continuing to try to make that work. And we saw the rewards of it against Cairns. He had 15 and 17 in that game. That was really good performance from him. But I think that's what it is. And unfortunately, when Gorge continues to second guess whether these guys can make an impact on his team, then it forces him, in his mind, to make changes to the lineups, which then takes them out of any continuity or consistency, and it doesn't let different lineups and different combinations learn how to play alongside each other. So I think it's affecting them in the long run. Again, the fact that they're 14 and 10 and getting by on what I think is just like talent being really, really solid defensively, and I think their schemes are largely good defensively too. I think a lot of this is Xavier Cooks and his versatility on the defensive end that is just keeping this team at a reasonable level, because offensively they've been pretty bad. They've been below average the entire season. So I don't know whether this is ultimately going to click, because the talent's there, but they need continuity. And I think Gorge maybe just has to bite the bullet and roll with lineups for extended periods of time with the hope that they can mesh and learn how to play alongside each other.
Yeah, the formula is changing night to night, and he's admitted this. He's trying to search for who it is that can give him the defensive intensity, especially that he wants, which is kind of fascinating because, as you pointed to, they've been a pretty good defensive team across the board all season long. I know Xavier Cooks is a lightning rod. People don't like when you pump him up if they're not Sydney Kings fans, but all the advanced metrics, he's the one guy that started every game for this Sydney Kings team. He plays the undersized 5. He's the best defender on this team pretty comfortably. I know Alex Tui provides some versatility, but to me, it's Cooks by a mile. His on-off numbers.
Cooks right now, Kane, is the defensive player of the year. And I think this is like, I think it's pretty easy. The advanced metrics say it. The team defense says it. When you watch him play, I think it says it. I think he's just being overlooked because the expectations, because of his contract and all that. But he's a top 3 MVP guy and the defensive player of the year right now. And I think that's like relatively comfortable. Sorry for interrupting, but like, it's just people just dismiss it because of it's the Golding effect too. People don't want to love what he does, but he's just obviously one of the most talented guys we've seen this generation.
He's dynamic defensively. I'd have to look through that. I know there's a bunch of defensive guys across the league that have had a pretty big impact there. But yeah, this Sydney Kings, he feels like a lot of the times he's the guy that's holding them together. But if you look at the Melbourne game, like right now, the formula for Brian Goorjian is, all right, just mix and match the lineups. Doesn't really matter who starts because it's changing every second week anyway. Let's just find a group that catches fire defensively and starts causing chaos. Then we get some easy baskets in transition. And then it's been in the fourth quarter. Okay, we're down by 10 points. Let's ride Jalen Adams or Kawhi Noi, the hot hand, and let's try and win the game. And I said it on last week's podcast, you can't continually come from behind to win these games of basketball. Like, it's just not going to work. You're not going to win a title doing that. And against Melbourne, they tried to do it again. And that was no Cam Oliver in the second half at all. And Jalen Adams did not play in the fourth quarter at all. And in that Melbourne game, it was a lineup of Liafa, Bruce, Bull Qual, Alex Tui.
He did play in the fourth quarter.
Cooks.
He played the first minute, and Melbourne went on an 8-0 run. So it was like they tried it out, and it was like, all right, this isn't working today.
Yeah, and he said, okay, well, this is, don't matter who it is at this point in time, he seems increasingly frustrated. The leash is just not there. So it was Liafa, Bruce, Bull Qual, Cooks, Tui in the third quarter that started to actually get some energy for the Sydney Kings team. And then in the game against Cairns, Jalen Adams was back in the closing lineup with Kawhi Noi, and then Cam Oliver, Xavier Cooks, and Bull Qual were a part of that as well. So you're just seeing like night to night, it's just changing every single time. And I thought that Cam Oliver in that game was energized. Now, he still led some baskets out. And trust me, he's not a rim protector. He's not a guy. He's not a wall in the paint. That's for damn sure. But you see the difference in him night to night. Okay, now he's energized, and it's not just the offensive stuff, but he will like run up and down the floor, and he was doing that a bit in the Cairns game, at least a little bit more. Probably still not to where Brian Goorjian wants him to be, but I don't know, man. I think at this point in time, he's just going to continue to search for the answers. The one thing I would say, you do notice, and I know I've been pumping up Sean Bruce all season long, aside from the fact that he really got under the skin of the Melbourne United team, which was at least entertaining to watch, I do think that he is a guy that you want on the floor with Cam Oliver in those minutes if you can, because I do think he's one of the guys in this team from the guard spot that really is able to get Cam Oliver the ball, whether it is in the post, whether it is in the mid-range, whether it is in pick and roll. I think those two, Bruce goes out of his way. He's like a veteran point guard. He knows who needs to get going. He knows who can be the guy that can help this team. I like the minutes when them two are together.
Yeah, Jalen Adams said in the press conference after the game that he missed Cam on a lob and he beat himself up about it. I don't know if Jalen Adams is like a natural like lob thrower or, you know, a guy who like finds guys on rolls like on a consistent basis. We've seen small examples of it, but I don't know if that's like what he's built to do. He's built as like a pick and roll scorer type. And so I agree, like the Sean Bruce minutes are important. Having Xavier as like a short roll outlet who can find Cam Oliver on drop-offs. Jalen Adams found him on a drop-off too. We've seen Tui throw lobs to Cam Oliver and find rollers too. So they have guys who can find rollers. Like I want to see Buchwald get into that space as well. I thought they'd see a bit of advancement in his offensive game, maybe coming off on balls and creating for himself, but also others. I think they wanted maybe to see more of that. I think they need another version of a creator who can put the ball on the floor and carry for a bit. But I agree. That's why the Sean Bruce minutes, I don't know if they realize how important they'd be. It's why they signed Lamonte Turner for
hey, what happened?
Like 2 or 3 minutes. Lamonte went through a medical and he wasn't ready to play basketball. It's just what it is. So they had to send him home, unfortunately. And so Bruce, because of that, becomes unbelievably more important. Yes.
Can I ask in that situation with Lamonte Turner? So clearly mishap. We've got Andrew Bogut on the Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops show on Thursday night leading into the NBL doubleheader on ESPN. So that's going to be a good one. Because I am fascinated to know. But to the Sydney Kings then, they bring this guy out. I assume they pay for his flight to come out here. We're excited to have you play for the team. We're going to make a championship push. Do they also have to pay for his flight home? And do they they send him home in economy, or what goes on there? Do they say, look, man, this is not what we paid for? You're going at the back of the plane on the way back.
My guess, with the greatest respect to Lamonte Turner, is that he probably would have flown economy at the very most premium economy on the way here. It would like if he got an email that says like, hey, like your premium economy has been demoted to economy on the way back,
Setback.
Absolute setback. But the dude came here and wasn't ready to play basketball. And I think the Kings thought that he would be ready to play. And so there was a miscommunication in that process. Part of that process messed up, which the Kings have to go and look back and fix that. Chris Pongrass is the CEO of that team. He's the one who guides the processes. Buck stops with him. He's got to be better at that as well. But the Kings team has consistently made good decisions and operate in a really organized way. So you give them grace with this situation. But when you look at it and you look at what Goorj had been asking for this whole time, again, we spoke about it ad nauseum in the lead up to it, that a small change is the thing that could get you over the line. Because again, Illawarra can just go and lose to Adelaide. You have one good half against them, and you could beat the team that's number one right now. There's no outstanding team, and that one little change could have been enough. This little change could have been enough to lift Sydney over the edge. Now they still might do it, they might not do it, but again, if this is the thing that costs them, then that sucks for them, and they've got to really fine tune their processes going forward, because this can't happen. And also, don't wait until the last minute. Don't run down the clock and get the guy on your seventh last game. Give yourself a bit of time in case something like this happens. Obviously, this is a very rare circumstance, but don't run down the clock until the last second. You got to play don't go 7 for 1. Go 8, 9, 10 for 1 before you go get a guy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when you come down to the point where he has to play every game, there could have been another little niggle that is just it turns an ankle. It's a one-game thing. I know that they can put him on the floor. They could probably work their way around it, but geez, yeah, they were cutting it fine. So, and difficult to get a player at this time of year while all the leagues are underway as well. So, certainly appreciate that. But yeah, just one of you, a Sydney Kings fan, you'd be incredibly upset that this is the way it went down. And if you're a fan of any other team, you're incredibly happy that this happened to the Sydney Kings, because they don't get another guy to bring in. We'll see what the Kings look like over the next few weeks. And let us know what you thought of this podcast. I'd be curious about Adelaide 36ers fans. I do wonder, they beat the top team on the ladder there. And I've been trying to get the vibe from Adelaide 36ers fans, and I feel like it swings from excited to complete rage to despondent to maybe there's a chance to disappointed again to now excited again and protective. They're protective of their team as well. Like it's such a fascinating situation it would be to really care about this basketball team. So, if you are still listening at this point and you're a 36ers fan, jump on YouTube and let us know how you're feeling, because it's been a fascinating few years, but a fascinating last 3 or 4 months, I would say, to be that team. It's the ultimate roller coaster, Oaks.
I think people within the team feel the same way too. They win a game, like they go beat Sydney, and it's all right, we can do something. And then they go lose a game to Tasmania, and it's we gotta blow this thing up. We gotta shut it down. Like everyone out of here, like clear out. And it feels like that's what it's like inside. And even when they win games against Illawarra, there are still fractures. So they're a dramatic team to cover, and they have been since we've been doing this. So I don't know why we thought anything would change, but man, it's dramatic over there. It's fun.
7 games to go, as I said. I think 4 teams battling for the last 2 spots in the play-in. It's going to be fascinating. We're going to see some crazy results along the way, and hopefully we come down to the last weekend trying to figure out who those teams are going to be. But it's going to be fascinating. Enter NBL. Keep it on ESPN. That's where you can watch every single game. ESPN.com.au for the latest news from that man, Olgun Ulich. Nothing but net Aussie Hoops Thursday night on ESPN. As I pointed to, Andrew Bogut will be there. It's going to be interesting to pick his mind about the Sydney Kings. Ryan Brockhoff is also going to be down there, and he's going to be breaking down some tape at the 36ers. So again, we continue to talk about this Adelaide team on the road to the postseason. That's going to do it for us today, the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane and Olgun. We'll see you next week.